good evening, good lunchtime, or any other time you're watching from. Welcome to the first ever Flutter Show. I'm very happy to have you here. We have prepared about 1.5 hours of exciting content, but keep in mind we are live. This is our very first live show. We might mess up things, and uh, we would like you to be gentle to us.
We will try our best. The Flutter Coffee Show came into existence to connect the community, despite, as you all know, those challenging times. Doing meetups, exchanging knowledge, and sharing experience of developing software in general got pretty difficult. This is our take to give all Flutteristas and Flutterists a stage to present, to discuss, and to connect with the whole Flutter community. We are planning to host a Flutter Coffee Show every 5 to 6 weeks, starting with today's world premiere.
The Flutter Coffee Show is obviously all about Flutter. We will cover news, packages, and just different updates from the community and the code. But Flutter Coffee Show is not just about code. We're also about people. Flutter itself isn't just a framework and a code. It's more like that. It's the whole community, the whole ecosystem. So we'll have a lot of interesting people from all over the globe who will join us, and we'll have a very interesting show for you.
They will show their initiatives they are doing, their showcases, real life examples of what they are building by using Flutter. And also, we want to give you a quick update on what's happening in the whole Flutterverse, like events, conferences, and everything else that's happening in the Flutterverse. So far, for the show in general, but where are my manners? Time to introduce you to the baristas, as we call it in the Flutter Coffee Show. I'm very happy to have you, Norbert, on board. Norbert, who is you and what's your favorite widget?
So my favorite widget is gonna probably be the container, because it's just this widget which is contained and it works and does all the things. My name is Norbert. I'm a Flutter developer. I'm also a student. You may know me from the articles I published or the packages I did. I've started developing Flutter for about 2.5 years ago, and I'm super happy to be here, and I'm super excited for the journey we went thus far. But who are you?
My name is Mike. I am the CTO of NeoHelden and one of the organizers of the Flutter Meetup group in Karlsruhe in Germany. Around 2 years ago, we made the best technical decision so far. We switched to Flutter. Coming from different other front-end technology stacks, I'm now dedicated to support the best cross-platform development framework in existence, at least in my opinion. And we have to be honest about it, we are not the whole team. There are 5 extraordinary people working in the background behind the scenes to make the show happen. And the question is, what is on the agenda for today's show, Norbert?
Yes, we have quite an agenda for today. We'll have news, which covers everything that happened in the last couple of months. We'll have a segment about packages, which you haven't heard about yet. We'll have an awesome talk about testing. We'll feature a community project which helps discovering new packages. And at the very end, we'll have a Q&A with a few people from the community. So stick around, don't leave early, and yeah.
I'm pretty excited about it. I think we have one of the most known people in the Flutter area for our today's Q&A session, and I'm very hyped about it. And before we jump into the topics of today's Flutter Coffee Show, we'd like to give you a quick update of what's happening in the Flutterverse. So let's switch over to our correspondent of the Flutter Coffee News. Coffee News, FCN. It seems to be a good week in the Flutterverse, looking at the recent accomplishments and milestones of the Flutter framework. Flutter has officially taken over React Native as the most searched framework according to Google Trends. Flutter has even more requests on Stack Overflow, and quite recently, we crossed 100,000 stars on GitHub, even more than Linux. eBay Motors published a recent article about using Flutter as their favorite framework. They literally said, Flutter has not only met our expectations, it has dramatically exceeded them. And it's quite interesting to see such a giant company use Flutter in a productive app on iOS and Android. This is what we like to hear in the Flutterverse. AWS, Amazon Web Services, quite recently published Amplify for Flutter. Amplify provides a declarative and easy to use interface across different categories of cloud operations. You can use it to authenticate, to do analytics, and to store your files using S3 on AWS. It's still in development, but we are quite excited to see how it compares to Google Firebase, the direct competitor of AWS in this area. Some bad news in the Flutterverse. Our package platform PubDev got targeted by spammers. They tried to publish Hollywood blockbusters and different other kind of contents on PubDev. It might be that they are publishing viruses, so don't use those links and report those packages. The maintainers of PubDev acted quite fast and implemented preventive measures to prevent those plugins from appearing again. Also, quite recently, the Flutter core team published an article about the Flutter architectural overview. It's an article about the high-level architecture of Flutter, featuring the layer model, reactive user interfaces, how widgets work, the rendering process in general, platform embedders, how to integrate with other code, and Flutter on the web. Flutter 120 got released and it features performance improvements, a mobile autofill, which enables you to automatically fill your forms on mobile platforms, an interactive viewer, which enables you to pan, zoom, drag and drop, and do different kind of resizings of content, and also an updated material slider, range slider, time picker, and date picker. And also breaking news, support for iOS 14 in yesterday's release. I got information from our technical department that we got some technical issues with the audio system. Our engineers are on the side and they will fix it immediately. Sorry about it. We will fix it and it will not happen again. So
yes, but at least we got good news. So that's one thing we got going for us. That was it for today's Flutter news segment. We'd love to see your contributions to the next episode. If you have ideas of segments or if you like this, dislike this, let us know with the hashtag FlutterCoffee hashtag on Twitter. And just share your ideas, whatever you got. We'll be happy to see what you have to tell us.
Yeah, actually, we will be featuring the best proposals we get from you guys on social media and wherever you're posting, or just post it in the chat on YouTube or on Twitch on this show itself. Next up, we have a young, dedicated Flutterista. In midst of the lockdown earlier this year, she decided to build a collection of the best Flutter packages, widgets, and projects. You could say real gems, like Flutter gems. Ashita Prasad, and sorry if I pronounce it not correctly, started coding at a pretty young age and decided to develop her platform in midst of the lockdown. And we want to see what she built in about 5 months only. So her stage to present Flutter gems.
Hi Flutter devs, I'm Ashita, a consultant by profession and a product person at heart. If you are an aspiring Flutter developer exploring the Flutter ecosystem comprising 12,000 plus packages can be quite overwhelming and intimidating. To help you navigate in this vast ecosystem, I would like to present before you my community project Flutter Gems. To better demonstrate the power of Flutter Gems, let's undertake a developer's journey through a demo app named Street Artist, which aims at propagating the street art or graffiti culture around the globe. So, where does the developer begin his journey? It starts with gathering the app's requirement, which is accompanied by a crude mockup or wireframe like the one shown, containing typical material components like an app bar, grid, image, icon, card, etc. This wireframe can be quickly realized into an app as shown using the material component widgets which are well documented in Flutter docs. After implementation, we can see that the card images are not depicting the true aspect ratio of the street art, hampering the visual experience. A quick solution is to fit images inside the cards. But again, this leads to improper utilization of the screen space, hampering the visual experience. A good solution to this problem would be to maintain the actual aspect ratio of the images and closely pack the cards. However, we do not have a pre-built widget in the library to implement this solution, which leads us to the next phase of a developer's journey, the hunt, where the developer tries to express the widget in words. This search starts with PubDev and often moves across multiple forums to seek the desired implementation. But what if I tell you about a visual discovery platform which can aid you in your hunt? Flutter Gems comes to the rescue as it provides 1500 plus widely used packages neatly curated based on core functionality. In this case, as the requirement is that of a custom grid, we can check out the grid category and come across some packages which can be directly used to create a staggered or waterfall grid. As the app evolves, so do the requirements to include new UI components. Some examples of such new requirements are to allow the app user to pick a location to show nearby graffitis, switch between map and grid view, adding image pop-ups in map view, modifying the floating action button to upload user provided graffitis, and adding reaction button for artworks. These functionalities are already implemented by the awesome Flutter community members, and you can visually and seamlessly locate them on Flutter Gems. So, what are you waiting for? Accelerate your app development journey today using Flutter Gems, and don't forget to contribute and join our awesome community.
Wow, pretty impressive stuff. I didn't expect to be, that Flutter Gems would be so interesting about experiencing widgets and finding new content. So the question for me, Norbert, how do you find new widgets when you're looking for new fancy stuff you want to see from all the community?
I'd say most of the times I just don't find them. Like I start implementing them, and after a couple of days or weeks of working and coding, somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey Norbert, I've seen you've worked on this thing. Look what I found." I'm like, "What?" So discovering widgets and expressing those widgets in words and searching for them is definitely a big thing. So this is a super interesting project. How do you usually find widgets?
I like the Flutter Weekly format on YouTube where they just explain like a widget or a module or a package, and they just explain how you use it with little snippets you can easily try out and try how it actually works, and you get a good feeling about what it does and how it works. And also, like the favorite packages on PubDev is quite a good list. Like the things you should be using in your projects, but you don't know yet sometimes. This is quite cool.
Yeah, I think as the Flutter ecosystem grows and there's going to be more and more packages, just having a way to find stuff better is very important, because it's not gonna get any easier by now. Packages are being created every day. So it's always nice to have some sort of project, some sort of initiative to somehow structure and store all of this this huge number of widgets, and not just widgets, just packages. If you have a project which is community related, if you have something you found, you made, or have heard about, let us know. Let us know on Twitter, #FlutterCoffee. We're happy to feature and see what you did.
Yeah, this was one example of a community project. And thank you again, Ashita, for this great contributions. We reached out to you and asked you if you want to be featured on the show. And we would love to see other community projects which really help us as developers, which help you to solve real issues using Flutter as a framework. And we would love to feature it on our show. So the difficult thing about packages is finding them. And I think there are a lot of packages out there which are not too much known. You could say underrated packages, like something you should be knowing about, but you don't. And we reached out to the community and asked, hey, what are some of your underrated packages which you never heard about and thought, okay, this might be interesting? And we collected them and made a short video about it. And Norbert will present you the most underrated packages as of today.
Welcome to Underrated Packages, where we take a look at packages you might not have heard about. I'm your host, Norbert, and let's get started. The first package on the list is gonna be Flutter Blur Hash. It is written by Robert Falker and is based on Blur Hash by Volt. Let's take a look. Blur Hash is a package and an algorithm which basically encodes an image in a very compact string. This is useful for apps which heavily utilizes images, because images sometimes take a bit to load, especially in bad connections. And using a blur hash, you can preview an image, which is a very rough approximation of the actual image, which just makes it feel and look a bit better. Basically works by taking an input image, which is on your backend, running the algorithm on it, and it produces this very tiny string, which can be sent to the client way faster than the image itself. If we take a look at the package, all we have is a blur hash widget, which takes this string, which itself is just a hash of the image. And using that, it just displays it. Let's hop over to IntelliJ, take a look. First, we include dependency. We run packages get. And I've prepared a little application, which is basically the example. We have our blur hash widget, which takes a string. Usually what you would be doing is have a call to your backend, which first loads the hash, which is super fast, and then loads the image, which may take some time in in areas with bad connection. If you run this, you will see an image or an approximation of that image, and using a future builder or something which loads in the image afterwards, you can replace this image with the actual full resolution image. The next package is going to be a quick one. It's called Time Ago, and it is a library for creating fuzzy timestamps. This means if you have a time which happened, for example, 10 minutes ago, instead of writing that time and telling it was 8 p.m., you can also show the user it was 5 minutes ago. Implementing this yourself is possible, but it's annoying, and why do if there's a package? First, add it as a dependency into your pubspec.yaml, run packages get, and then you can just create date times using the Dart APIs, datetime_now.subtract, datetime_now.add, and last but not least, using the timeago.format function, call it on the date time and it is producing the string representation of that timestamp. In this case, we have a time which happened 50 minutes ago. It prints 50 minutes ago. And we have a timestamp which will be happening in 30 seconds, and it says a moment from now. The next package is for serialization using code generation. There are a couple of other packages which do the same, but this does it a bit differently. Let's take a look at how to install it. First, we add a dependency to Dart.json mapper. Next, we have to add a dependency on the build runner. And last but not least, we have to add a build.yaml file and give it the main entry point of your application. Usually, this is lib/main.dart. In my case, it is something different. Then you can annotate all the classes you would like to serialize using the add.json serializable. There are a bunch of properties you can take a look at in the README. At very last, you have to run code generation. For this, just type flutter pub run build runner build. This will generate all the necessary code for this to work. Instead of having to extend, implement, or add classes, all you have to do is call jsonmapper.serialize or jsonmapper.deserialize. This will turn your object into JSON and JSON back into your object. What I like about this package is, for one, it supports polymorphic use cases where you have classes which extend other classes and you'd like to retain that information in the JSON format. On the other hand, you don't have to extend or do other stuff to your model. You only have to annotate it and it is taken care of. If you ever had to deal with error screens and other kind of error messages, this package might be something for you. It's called Sub. What it does is provide you easy to use and customizable widgets, which show error messages and allow users to retry some operation. After installing the packages, you have access to a quick sub widget or a sub widget. In this case, I use the quicksub.error widget. We give it a title, we give it a retry title, and we give it a callback. This widget looks like this. Without too much effort, we have an error widget we can drop into our app and use right away. That's all the packages I got today, but I'm quite sure there are quite a few more packages which deserve some more love. So let me know in the comments below if you know any package which is underrated, but you use and think is great. Thank you.
Okay, we are live. Okay. Well, pretty interesting stuff so far. Thank you. You presented a segment, but what are some of the other underrated packages which you experienced in your Flutter lifetime so far?
So I really wouldn't call them underrated at all. It's more of the opposite, but some interesting packages at least, which are pretty new. So the block package, which pretty much everybody knows, got a big update recently, some time ago. It's been a bit. Block now also supports Qubit, which is basically a superclass of Block, which has some interesting API changes, which you might want to check out if you've given Block a try before but didn't like it. Do you have something else?
Yeah, we had at least this issue where we tried to get a time zone, and we weren't able to do so. There's an issue on GitHub where they're discussing about putting time zone support into Dart natively, so it's officially supported, but it's not yet there. So we needed a way to get the time zone, essentially, like just Europe, Berlin or something, to know where the device is currently at. And this is one of the packages I think are, as of right now, underrated, because it's one of the issues you have when dealing with time zones, or when you have to get the information in which time zone your device is. Pretty edge case, but I think it's underrated. I would have loved to know about it earlier.
Sounds like a great package. Time zones are, I've heard, always not too much fun to deal with, especially if there's so many time zones which are also different and weird. Some have summertime daylight saving, some don't, and it's just a mess, I've heard.
It always gets messy when you're dealing with times and time zones. So more than happy to have a plugin or a package which is able to deal with it. And one of the things we also had, it's a pretty like advanced stuff when you have to deal with licenses. There is a package out there which is capable of checking all your dependencies and getting like the license viewer, you know, the license viewer widget, which came in 1.19, I guess.
It's built in Flutter, and you can just call show license page or something.
Yeah,
Yes.
you get an overview of all packages which are included in your app, and depending on what you're doing with your application and in which country you're living in, you are obligated to do so, to just list all your licenses. And this is something I found pretty difficult, just to check, okay, what kind of licenses are involved in our Dart packages? Because with all the other like large platforms with Java or JavaScript with NPM, you have like always license scanners, license checkers. For example, Black Duck is a pretty expensive software, so to say. And we had this issue. Yeah, we needed to check, is there, for example, a GPL-based license in the code, and find it at least and know if it's there. And there's a good plugin out there which is capable of listing just all your licenses and giving you a good overview.
It's pretty interesting. I haven't thought about that problem too much, but yeah, just knowing if there is at least one license which breaks your whole licensing model is, I could imagine, super important for bigger apps which are being sold and done business with. I also have another package. You might have seen some sort of a theme with these, state management, but Riverpod by Remy is his newest, still, I think, been work in progress, but super useful and already usable state management solution, which is the new provider. Funny enough, Riverpod is just a recombination of the letters for provider, if I'm not mistaken. It is super interesting and super nice to use. I don't want to go into the detail because we'd be sitting here for another 2 hours, but I've been using it. I like it. If you haven't, give it a try.
I think like the whole topic about state management, I think it's one of the most important questions in the Flutter area in general. As of right now, I think as soon as you start discussing about state management, it gets pretty hard, because you have different kind of opinions, you have different kind of solutions, and quite a lot of movement, especially recently through, for example, Riverpod or the updates to Block, which essentially changed the way we are currently developing Flutter applications. And as we know from other ecosystems, like state management is not the easiest issue to solve. So
you could say so.
I'd say this would be an awesome thing for the Flutter Coffee Show to see the different ways you can do state management and which solutions currently work, and also like real life experience. I don't know, what kind of state management are you currently using?
I've a couple of different projects, but I'm using Riverpod for one.
Okay.
And I'm using Block for another. So I'm doing both sides, and I'm always super eager to experiment and see what different solutions provide. And also, the cool thing about state management is why it could be such a great topic for our coffee show is because there is no solutions to state management. There is no single solution. There's always going to be room for discussion, which is perfect for our show.
Definitely. So if you have an idea like about state management or any other kind of topic or package in general, just post it in the chat. We want to feature your idea. And if you like state management, or if you like Riverpod, we want to have you on the show maybe too. And this was quite interesting to see that they are not underrated packages, to be honest. They are definitely also not overrated. They are necessary.
They are rated.
They are rated, yeah. They have to be there. Otherwise, you won't be doing apps too good. Thank you so far for all the viewers we have. But, I mean, a difficult other topic than testing. Wow, this is live. A difficult other topic than state management is testing. Yes. And I mean, testing in software development is like sports. Everybody knows it's good for you, and you should definitely do it, but you'll always find excuses not to do it. And this is why we decided, okay, testing will be something we want to feature on the very first show. And we are pretty hyped. Who do we have for the next upcoming talk?
Yes, I'm super happy to announce for next talk, which is all about testing, unit tests, widget tests, and those nice end-to-end tests. We have Nash and Mariano. So enjoy the talk and see you afterwards.
Hey everyone, welcome to a Flutter Cafe show. This is going to be an amazing topic. We're going to talk about something that not a lot of people do, but everyone is excited. Maybe someday in the careers to do it is unit testing, UI testing, and a little bit more. My name is Mariano Sorella. I'm a tech lead at Venmo, and I also Google developer expert for Flutter and Dart. And with me is
Nash, and I am a Flutter developer at a startup in NYC, and you may know me as the lead editor and administrator of the Flutter community medium and various other online topics.
all right. What is unit test and what is so important? So the unit test is a way to verify your behavior in your app, your function, and methods and class. What it means is the whole business class, the whole business logic of your application. If you want to test something that it comes from the server, or you have any mock data that is supposed to be the server driven, you can actually test if this works. So when you implement a new function, or if you want to test that something that you implemented didn't break something in the past, unit test is perfect for this. Why is so important? Because the business logic, that, like the name says, is part of the business of your application. If this breaks, then your entire application could face a lot of crashes, or even your company could lose a lot of money. Flutter comes with two really handy applications and packages for this. One is called the test, straight up is part of the core framework, and the other one is the Flutter test package, which has additional utilities to also test widgets. So how do we test it? Fairly simple. If we have a model, like a change notifier from your application, what you need to do is define it as you will use in your current widget, in your current application. You'll have a list of items. You could add those items, you could remove those items, whatever the logic you want to do, just to make sure that this element works. Okay, so this is part that you normally use in your application. What do you have to do now? Inside your project, you most likely, when you create a new Flutter project, you will have a test folder, which you ended up deleting the only class that is there, because as soon as you start removing those elements, you will see that the tests start getting a lot of errors. So you can delete that file completely and you can create a new one. The name of that one, it doesn't matter. It could be any single name. It doesn't have to even say test, but it needs to be easily recognizable when you later do the test. So if you do, for example, testing a shopping item, just call it unit test shopping item, or something similar, something that is really easy and findable in the way that you can do your unit test. What we're going to do, in the same fashion that we created a run app from your application on Dart, on Flutter, you're going to do the same, but we're going to use the main one. And the main is going to have a test. These tests are individual collected, so we can have a title. That way we can identify it later, that if that test run or not, and if it tests correctly. Then we're going to fetch our model. The model, the same one that I showed you before, the one that we use in our app. We're going to create that model as a variable. And what we're going to do in this case, for example, we're going to add a new item. In this case, because it was a list of strings, we can put any name that we want. It doesn't have to be test, but in this case, just for the sake of simplicity, we name it test. So once we name and add a new item, we need what is called in different languages or different platforms, asserts or expect. In this case, it's a spec. What we're doing is expecting something. If we fetch the first element from the list, we expect something. In this case, that the name of it is called test. And then we can later test if the length of our list is actually 1, because we only add one item. The same case, if we remove an item, this will be 0. In the case of the second line that we have is we add a second test, a second string from that list. And again, we match if the length now is 2, and if the second index, which is index 1, in this case, the second element, it has test 2. But how do I execute it? Fairly and super simple. We got many different ways to do it. If you are really like the terminal way to do this stuff, you can just call Flutter space test, and it's going to run every single test inside your test folder. But if you want to test one specific one, the one that we just did, you just call Flutter space test and the exact address and direction of your test specific file on Dart. If not, if you're using VS Code or Android Studio for your IDE, you have a handy run for your test, and that's going to run with a more visual fashion. And it's going to give you also the name of the test that we put in this case, like add item. You're going to see that one, and it's going to give you a check mark if it actually passed, or it's going to give you a cross that it didn't pass and some error went through that one. And it's going to tell you what the error was. so you can then fix it and go through and make sure that you have a correct pass or your unit test.
Cool. So as Mariano said, unit tests are terrific for testing individual Dart functions and classes and basically the business logic or the back end of your application. Now, when it comes to testing widgets or the actual elements you see on screen, we have something else. We have a widget test. And Flutter comes with a test package that is built into Dart and is used to test Dart functions, but we also have the Flutter_test package, which is used to test widgets. And widget tests are great for testing individual elements and widgets displayed on the screen. You can use them to tap on widgets to make sure that your callback function is fired if you have like a button, or you can use them to verify that the text style of your widgets are displayed correctly on the screen. You can even use them to check to make sure your widgets adapt once your screen sizes changes or some other thing happens to your device. Here we have an example. We have an app bar that is resizing and changing its layout when the screen size hits a certain threshold. We can see we have elements on the app bar laid out in a row once the window is large enough, but once it gets too small, we change it to a drawer with an icon. So this is a really simple use case, but the question remains, how do we test something like this? Well, the first thing, like any test you write, is you identify what you want to test. Here we have two distinct behaviors. We have a use case when the window is large, we have items on the app bar itself. And when the window is small, we have them in a drawer. So we know we have these two use cases that we want to look for. Now, if we look at the code, we have a test widgets function, which may seem familiar to the test function Mariano showed earlier. We give it a description, it has a callback, and within this callback, it has a widget tester. And this widget tester is used to basically interact with your widget. Now here we are creating a variable called widget, and we are wrapping it in a media query size, because if you remember the GIF, what we're testing is to make sure our widget responds to different screen sizes. So we give it a size, we call the example page, which is our widget, and we use tester.pump widget. Now, if you are familiar with Flutter, you know that every widget has a build method. Tester.pump widget basically builds the widget on the screen. Now, it's important for unit tests, you don't actually see the widget running. You basically have everything is done through the command line or the IDE GUI. Here we're wrapping our widget in a material app or a material widget, and that's basically a util because if you remember, or if you are familiar with Flutter, you would know every widget in Flutter requires, or most widgets in Flutter rather, requires a material ancestor, and this is where it gets its text direction and layout information from. So we wrap it in our material widget, and then we create what's known as a finder. Now, a finder, like the name implies, it basically finds the attribute or element on your screen. And here we're using text. Finders, you can use you have like a large variety of methods you can use to find your widgets. You can find them by icon, by value keys, by actual widgets, but the simplest one is text. It basically goes out and looks for a widget matching the text item 1, item 2, and it holds reference to it. Now, this is a large device. So we know on a large device, we expect to find these two widgets present. So we have our expectation similar to the unit test. We expect that the item finder, we have one widget. And the second item, we also have one widget. And this is basically your hello world to a widget test. It's very simple and it can be very concise. Now, the second use case we have in this example is the drawer. But the drawer, if we remember, it's a bit more complicated, right? Because on smaller devices, you now have this icon that is used to trigger the drawer. And clicking the drawer doesn't immediately pop it open. There's a slight animation that you have to wait for before the drawer is open. So as a developer writing a test for this, you might be wondering, how do we do this? Do we wait a certain duration or something? How do we handle this? And Luckily for us, the framework and the testing framework makes it super simple. So similar to the last test, we have our test widgets function. We are giving the media query a size. In this case, we're giving it 600 by 600, which is a really small square. And here we are pumping the widget like we did before, giving it the material widget as the ancestor. But we're also finding our icon, and we're using a different find method. This time we're using the find by icon because we're certain we only have one icon on screen. That is the subject icon. So we create our finder. And now it comes to the part where how do we open the drawer? To open the drawer, if we were doing it as a user on device, we would want to tap it, right? And that's exactly what we do in our test. The tester method, the tester property, sorry, has a method called tap. You give it the finder, and it basically simulates a tap at that finder's location. Now, you just as a note here, you don't always have to pass a finder. You can use a tap at method on the tester, and you can pass it a custom offset. So you can simulate taps anywhere on the screen, or you can simulate gestures anywhere on the screen. You don't have to use a finder. So you have that level of customizability if you want to. Now we tap the widget. So if we remember how drawers operate, now we have to wait for that animation to happen, right? The drawer just doesn't immediately pop into your face. So here we're using pump and settle, and pump and settle basically rebuilds our widget after you tap it, and it waits for any animation or any sort of layout to finish. So we tap our widget and then we rebuild it. So now the state of our widget has changed. Now our drawer is open. So if you have any sort of state change in your widget, pump and settle is a great way to rebuild your widget to observe that state change. And now with our widget open, we have a very similar expectation to our previous test. We basically want to find and make sure that our item 1 and item 2 are present on our screen. So just like before, we create our finder with a reference to it, and we expect to find one widget for both of those items.
We also have a little bit more complex scenario. What if you have a real case on an app where we have different items that we fetch from an API or a JSON or local JSON, and it has a lot of information that we need to check. It could be alignments, it could be colors, it could be text, and all different scenarios that it could happen in an actual real life production application. So in this case, I'm having a shopping item, the ones that you see on the grid list, that it only receives one specific model that is called shop, and that shop is going to give a lot of information to our shopping item. It could be different colors, it could be different alignments, or different information. In the cases on this one, as you can see, I set it up at different value keys that you're going to see later why I was using a specific in those specific widgets, for example, in the container or in the text. So it's easy to find later for the UI test and the widget test. All right, but how do we do it? So the same way that Nash mentioned, we need to create our material app that we're going to make the widget test. And then we're going to make, again, a test widget, which is going to have a description, so it's better identifier later. And we're going to have our async callback for it. In this case, the same way that you will call at a local JSON from your assets is the same way you call from here. This is really useful for if you have mock information for the specific, for example, in this case, it's a shopping item, but it could be anything that you have in your different models. So we fetch into this one, we create a list of all the shops. We just map them into the specific model. But in this case, I only wanted to bring the first one because I want to make sure that that information is correct inside my widget. So what I do is with my tester, I pump this widget. I make sure that I created with my material one, and I have my shopping item, and I pass along the item that I chose pass it. We have a set of 3 exactly test widgets, and then I do the exact same 3 tests, but with a different fashion. This way, we can see how many different flavors you have out of the UI test, and not just one, only finding by text or only finding by color or by finding by icon. We can also find it by key or different what is called matcher, which is going to be a specific ways to find and spec a widget out of it. So in the same case that Nash did, I'm finding by the text. I make sure that a text should only bring one specific widget. And the other one, in the second one, we can see that I'm finding by color, and in the other one, we're finding by the alignment. This one using a specific class, which is called matcher, which I'm going to show you a little bit after this one. But then I wanted to focus on the value keys because we can have the same thing. We can have a background with a color and a text with a color. So if I'm finding by a color, maybe I will find more than one widget, and that's not exactly what we're going to do in the UI test. We're going to make sure that the specific thing that we're going to find and test is the only one being considered for this UI test. So it's a way to do it. So when you have a tester widget, we pass along which specific widget we need to test. In this case, is a text. And then I pass along what a specific ID was passed in my Flutter app. In this case was product name. So I bring the information out of it, and then I match it with the expected value, which is what's item name. If those two matches, then my test is going to pass. If not, it's going to give me an error. For the second one, I have a container. I want to make sure that that container has a specific color. Again, I find my container, I make sure that the color that I bring from the decoration box has the expected color, and again, it's going to give me okay if it's correct. If not, it's going to give me an error. And for the last one, the same exact case, but using an alignment. Well, if you remember in the case before, when we have a color and a finder and a line finder, we're using something that's called matcher. So what is a matcher? So the match finder is a class that it comes from the Flutter test, as you see in the import. So the class could be every single name that you wanted. Doesn't matter. It doesn't affect in the slightly minimum, but we really need to extend the match finder. Why? Because it has two override methods. One is the description, the one we're going to identify later when we run the test, and the other one is the actual matches. So we will have a candidate. This candidate is going to go through your render tree. It's going to find into your pump widget that you just passed, and it's going to try to find the specific one that you needed. In this case, I'm trying to find a container. That's what I call a container by alignment. And from that container, I need to bring all the information available. So I bring the widget and I bring the alignment. Once that I match the container alignment with the alignment that I pass as a variable, if those two matches, I'm going to bring a true and my test is going to pass. If not, it's going to give me a false and it's going to give me an error. So those are not the only ones. These are the most basic cases you're going to have in scenarios. You're going to have unit tests and widget tests. Those are the most easy to test because you don't have any weightings, emulators running your UI and do the expected behavior. But we still have those tests, which are called integration tests. What the integration test is creating the flow that your user will do inside your app. In this case, as you can see, the user will sign in and then it will log out. But we're going to have many different scenarios. We're going to have one when the user is trying to change an image of the profile or to try to change the name of the username. And we need to test with a real case scenario if the user has an input file and then it enters the username, and if the username is a valid one, or an email, for example, if you have something that it matches and verifies that it's an actual email. If the user enters something different as an email, we can do it as a more UI fashion to check for example, the text form field gives me an actual error, and I can visualize that error. All this uses what is called the Flutter driver. So a little bit of code over here. What is a Flutter driver? Fairly similar to all the tests that we were doing right now. It is similar to the UI test and the unit test. It has a test, it has a description, and it has a callback method. In the same way we do with a widget test, we need to find elements by a key or different ways. In this case, it's finding by the key. It's waiting for a response that we make sure that the anonymous sign-in is the button that is going to be clicked. Once that one, we wait for a delay just to make sure that we capture all that video. We tap on it, and again, we will wait for a response. We're going to wait again, so make sure the users actually log in. We find the button, we click the button, and we make sure that the user is going to log out. In this case, it's going to prompt a logout confirmation button. So again, we wait for that one. We find it, identify it, and we click on it. If all those finish and all that gets okay, all this test is going to give me a pass and it's going to work correctly.
So that's the three main tests that we can do in Flutter. What else is available to developers? Well, Flutter the test command in Flutter actually generates a Lakov info file for you out of the box. So you can do Flutter test -- coverage, and it would generate a coverage report for you, which you can then use with something like the Lakov brew package on macOS to generate an HTML report that allows you to see what percentage of your code is covered by tests and what are the areas in which you can improve. Now, here we have a workflow of that actually happening. You see we're basically passing the dash dash coverage. It generates the info file. And now once we have our HTML generated, we can basically open that in Chrome. And here we see we have a coverage report that says we have 24% of our code base covered, which I hope is a number no one has in your production applications. That, of course, unless your name is Norbert, in which case you're probably fine. But yeah, we have support for coverage, and the red lines are the lines in your code base that is not covered by test. The blue lines or the green lines would be the ones that is covered by test. So it's a great way to measure what percentage of your code is covered, but also measure and get an indicator for how your code is performing and the health of your code base overall. Something else that's available is Block. The Block package by Felix has a test framework actually built in, or well, as a separate package that you can use to test your blocks as if they were a unit test, basically. Here we can see a quick example, but you have support for Mockito, so you can mock your blocks if you want to, and you basically write your block test very similar to a unit test, where you give it a description, you can build your block, and you have an array of expectations, and this can be an array of values that your block emits over time, or an array of states that your block transitions to. So you have a lot of very powerful tools available to you within the Flutter ecosystem that you can take advantage of to write tests for your applications and make sure that your code base is covered all the way.
And that will be pretty much a ramp up from our UI unit tests a little bit more. Thank you so much, Nash, for helping me doing this presentation. Thank you so much again to Norbert and the Flutter Coffee Show for all this. You can follow us on social media. I'm GeekMC over Twitter, and Nash also has Nash OX7E2, super long one, but we are also available on GitHub, on Medium, and different forums. You can just hit us on social media and we can give you all the information we can have. And we can also share a project that we have and made for this, which, for example, that I showed the example that I did for the shopping items, and then we can pop to GitHub if you want to search a little bit more information of how to do your own unit tests in your own widget tests.
Yes, definitely. We hope this talk was helpful to you, and we look forward to getting your feedback and hopefully seeing more people writing tests for their Flutter applications out in a while. So if you're having any problems or you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll see how best we can help you. So thank you.
Gladly, this was a fake exception, not a real one, because we did our testing.
Yes, we did.
Pretty awesome. Now, but what would you say to somebody telling you that testing is only for developers with low self-esteem?
Well, if low self-esteem involves not sitting at your computer at 3 a.m. in the morning fixing some production critical bugs that are affecting thousands of users, then gladly call me low self-esteem.
Well, not something you want to do. So testing might be pretty helpful.
Yes.
And it's a difficult topic. And I think we got a few questions from our last discussion. Should we just jump over a few of them, like what the community thought about? I think the discussion about state management was quite, yeah.
Yes.
People got interested in those questions. For example, Scott asked, one interesting point is we often say you could use state management approach, X for an app, but maybe we should talk about situations where approximate X would not be a great choice.
Yes, that's a very good topic, actually, because people tend to talk about when to use stuff, but not really when not to use stuff, because, I mean, it's more exciting to talk about things to do and rather than things not to do. So I think we both see there is a lot of discussion ground for this. So we might have a special to state management in one of the upcoming Flutter Show events. So stay tuned for that.
Just one thing that comes to my mind, if you talk about the best solution of doing state management, is there like a purist community who says, no, we don't do any kind of state management, we just use in-house Flutter, nothing else? Is there something like this already? Like,
I don't know of any. Do you?
No, actually not. This would be quite interesting. Like somebody just saying, okay, I don't know what to use. I don't use any kind of state management at all and just use what is pre-built in Flutter. And
I mean, if it works, like if you have a working app which is easy to maintain, go for it.
would be an interesting approach. But yeah, I'm pretty hyped about the other question. Do we have other questions? Question to the Rishi in our studio. Okay, studio says it's all fine. So
we'll have more for the next episode.
I'm pretty hyped about the next topic, especially as we're talking about testing with pretty interesting people who are pretty experienced building actual Flutter applications and doing so for more than 3 or 4 years, partially. Who is joining the Q&A session now, Norbert?
Yes, you just said it. We're having a Q&A for our coffee table session with some of the interesting members of the community. Do we want to start the stream?
Definitely. Let's go for it.
Okay.
Our first guest, you have to introduce them then.
Yes.
Oh, it's Simon.
Welcome. Happy to have you here.
Good to be here.
Simon Lightfoot. I just noticed, do I have the audio of the stream? Some technical difficulties? Do I have the audio?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, now I can hear you too. So our very first guest, Simon. Nice to have you here. We also have Jay. Nice to have you.
Hi, Jay.
Next up is Mariano, who just did an amazing talk about testing. So he'll be one of the people to ask. And last but not least, we have Nawal. Think you might be having some video issues.
This is a pretty interesting perspective, so to say. It looks like something went wrong with the testing on the
Is it just for us? Can you confirm? Okay, so we have a weird video artifact, but it seems to be all fine. So I'm very happy to have you here.
Good to be here.
Sorry?
So good to be here. Thank you.
So first off, let's start with an introduction. Just a quick introduction, who you are and what you're doing. Let's start with Simon, as he's the very first besides of me.
Hi, I'm Simon, one of the Flutter community leads. Currently doing lots of contract Flutter work and have been for some time. Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Jay?
Hi there. I'm Jay, or Jeroen, from the Netherlands. I also do contract Flutter work, sometimes with Simon, semi-colleagues, but aren't we all at this point? Yeah, and GDE, also a Flutter community lead, doing stuff with the GitHub and all open source projects that we do.
Nice. Next up, Nawal.
Hello, test 1, 2, 3. Is this working? Hello, everyone. This is Noah Tamwi. I'm a Flutter developer and a Flutterista, and I'm so thrilled to be here tonight.
We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
I guess I'm the last one. So my name is Mariano Sorella. I'm from Argentina. I'm a Google developer expert for Flutter. I'm a tech lead at Venmo. I also do some magic on BGV, very good ventures. I don't have time, apparently, but I do a lot of stuff. Also a GDG organizer for Buenos Aires here in Argentina. Yes, and I don't know, in the meantime, in the free time, I do also Flutter stuff and clones, and if I barely have any free time. So yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you all for being here, of being a part of the first ever Flutter show. So let's jump in. Let's jump right in with the first question. And the first question is a bit of a general question. Why, in your opinion, is testing important? or why it may not be so important. So in what cases, everybody says testing is important, but there are also cases where testing is maybe too much. What is your opinion on this?
Should I start?
Sure, let's go.
I think everyone here knows that my testing is not up to scratch. It hasn't been for some time. I need to sort it out. Thanks, Mariano, for the talk. I think the case about like why we should be testing is obviously is just to ensure that the code doesn't break. So for me, the reason that I would be testing something is to ensure that if I make changes in the future, they don't break code from the past, right? Now, there's only so much you can hold in your head at one time about the big picture of your application. So you know that if you change something over here, something else might break over there. But testing ensures that, right? Like you can have sort of hand on your heart reliability in the fact that your code is going to work, and you can, especially once it's been deployed. So once it's been deployed to the clients, you need to test this stuff because you want to make sure that you don't suddenly break something in the wild, for sure.
Thank you.
I can follow that one. I can give more like a big company's perspective industry. So doing testing is money because that's manpower, that's developer time, that takes time. Time equals money for companies. So if you're a huge company who already has profit, sure, you need to do it because you can lose a lot of money if your test fails and your app crashes and people hate it and it's going to delete it. Why? Because you have competition normally for big companies. Could be payment systems, could be games, etc. You have a huge competition. If you are on a startup, maybe hardware startup, that you have an app and most, if not all your users are early adapters, maybe testing will be the last thing you will think in that position because the users know they will have a lot of bugs. That's why they are early adapters for your technology or app. So they will be a little bit more permissive in terms of crashes, in terms of bugs and stuff. They will even report like happy, I would say, that, oh, I found a bug, and you will send an email and you have a direct contact with the maybe CEO, which will be glad to get your feedback and all those stuff. So I would say in those cases, if you're a little bit short with the money, your early adapters were a hardware system with an app, then you can pass along not doing unit tests and integration and UI tests. But again, if you're a big company, you need to do it. It's a mess because you can lose millions of dollars and your image of the company could be seriously affected.
Yeah, great insight. Like I like the differentiation of telling, okay, tests are important, obviously, but testing also costs money. It costs time. So you have to think about, should I either write these tests or try this feature out, which might fail, which might never need tests because it never gets delivered. So,
I mean, in the end, it's a trade-off between the risk or the cost it might result in if you don't do testing, to the cost you have when doing testing straight away in the beginning.
That's a good point.
Naval, what's your take on this?
So yeah, I'll be very honest in this. I don't usually do tests, but after this, well, yeah, I need to test. Definitely, because like doing tests, definitely, like it's like saving time and money, as Mariano and Simon had mentioned. Saving time and money for your future self, because definitely you will be the one who will suffer if the app went to into production mode and the code was like, as they say, spaghetti code.
Yes.
You can still test spaghetti code.
Not that easy, but if somebody can do it, then it is Jay. So what's your opinion, Jay?
I wouldn't say that immediately. But yeah, I mean, I'm just adding to what the rest have said, I guess. For me, testing, I usually write tests. I also try to convince my clients that writing tests is important. So in a couple projects that I'm doing, I've arranged that tests will come after a private internal beta release. So that way you can sort of segment it, right? Because I still want it to be there. Reason mostly being to protect you from yourself. And like in the long term, that's, I think, the one thing that people forget, because it's like, well, I've tested this like myself. I tried the feature out and it works properly. but there are edge cases and you have happy paths and other routes that any logic might go to. And ensuring all of those work beforehand saves time and money if your image depends on it as a company, but also gives a real good peace of mind that what you've written is mostly intact. And again, even if you have like 100% code coverage, that still doesn't mean that your app doesn't have bugs. You can write tests that pass on buggy code, right? But it gives peace of mind, and knowing that if you edit something, it very explicitly will tell you before it even hits master on the code base, usually, that something is up. So that's why I always try to get tests in there.
Something you did bring up there, I just want to mention, is you need to write tests that test the happy path as well as the bad paths. That's always people test the happy path and never like the resulting, what the errors should be and how you capture errors and how you propagate errors, and that needs to be tested.
And and pretty much like Jay say is, don't write pointless tests just to have testing points, if you want to say like testing scores, because you can clearly, like they say, it's like test a happy path, or even test pointless stuff like, hey, this text and we should expect this text. Sure, okay, but that's not really testing your app itself. It's just maybe covering one line that you pass a value and you mock it. If you get actual mock data that could change, and if that value change, how your app is going to react in the business logic, sure, you're doing a good job. But don't write tests just because you say, yeah, we have tests and that's it. And they're not actually testing anything at all. It's just they have points in your code.
So just a quick side note for those of you who don't know, happy path is basically the best case scenario. So if a user clicks for your app and it all works as expected, that's a path which is called the happy path. The other thing, if the user messes up or does something that couldn't even work, that's the not so happy path.
If the user does the unexpected, as he usually does. So when is the perfect time to start writing a test? Is it, do you first implement a test like test-driven development style, or do you build an application and then try to break it and write a test for it later on?
Is this an open question?
This is an open question.
Who wants to take this?
Jay, go ahead.
Sure. Well, I like the idea of test-driven development, where you know what the logic will do and test for it before you've even written the logic itself. That makes sense to me in a way. But I feel like when I'm developing, my sort of headspace is in a certain feature development scope. And I like to finish that feature to know that what my thought train is doing the right thing. So I want to get that thought out as soon as possible and actually implement the feature. However, I would write a test at the end of my basic thing is I try to divide everything up into features, make commits small, and before a PR gets merged, so before a pull request even is considered to be accepted, I want the tests to be there, as to always, in this case, handle, for example, 100% code coverage, which we'll probably get into later. So I divvy it up by feature. So if I have a feature or a certain pull request or a bit of code that needs to get in, I'll write tests for it, not for the entire project in one go or all before or all at the end if I can help it. But yeah, so I want to do it by sort of feature basis. First write the logic, then write the test, and keep alternating between those. That's sort of my strategy for it.
I would say that I do kind of similar as Jay. Even if depending on the project, depending on when you at the company, a lot of different factors that happen. Sometimes you see there's a lot of entrepreneurs who make a company. They realize they need to make an app. They're not sure if they hire the right people, if they hire the right CTO, and if the CTO has this mindset of doing TDD. So if from the very beginning the startup didn't thought about it, they're not going to do it. Most likely it will be like their last idea is like, oh yes, we need to do this. Or if the company at least has an idea, we'll do more like Jay says. We first have an idea what we wanted to build, because we're in an early stage. So we're not sure what we're going to test if we still don't know which features we're going to have. So we make the features and then we test it. But again, big companies, because they have time, because a feature gets to the developers when they pass like 20 different stages, different approvals and stuff. So you can already think about the different UI tests and unit tests that you need to do for that feature, even if you don't have any code writing so far. So I think it depends. Yeah, it depends on what work and which position and different stage of the company is for that application.
So I mean, just feeding back on that, when I worked at so we say a large company, they wanted to try TDD, and the problem here is that if you don't know what you're building before you start, it's very difficult to write the tests for that before you start, right? So you end up working on the project, refactoring, revolving around what you're actually doing. That breaks the test. You have to go back to the test and go back and forth, back and forth. It just isn't very productive at that point. You lose your context from your working on your code. So I normally find working on the code and then write the tests makes most sense. And then I know that if I break the code in the future, I can go fix the tests. But TDD for like the sake of TDD is just like 100% TDD is insane. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
So you all touched upon the next question, which I wanted to ask, which was TDD, which is short for test-driven development, which basically means, for those of you who don't know, you first write the tests, which are expected to fail because you didn't write the actual code, which should fulfill those tests yet, and you then write the code. And my question would have been yes or no. I think we have some clear opinions on that. Naval, do you have anything to say to TDD? Do you think it makes sense to first write the tests? Or do you say, okay, it doesn't make sense to first write the test because you're implementing the feature anyways?
Like, from my perspective, where I didn't touch upon testing, for other programmers, they might say, no, it makes sense. For me, no, I'd rather just finish up the feature than like implement the TDD on that feature X.
Yes, that's a good point. So, do you have another question, or should I proceed?
Not yet.
Okay, awesome. So, my question would be, we have a question here. So the question is, why do Flutter have so many state management solutions, and which one do you all use? So
Right. Well,
it's related to testing, but because we have this question here, don't want to skip it.
Make just a quick one. Just what
I just point Norbert, point them to the podcast. Point them to the podcast where we discuss this in detail.
Yes. So we have a podcast with Simon Lightfoot and Rody Davis where we extensively talked about state management, which you are very welcome to check out. The podcast called Creative Engineering. You will find it in the webs if you want to. But just so we have the question answered, everybody has 5 seconds to say something about test management. Let's go.
Jesus, sorry, state management. You say state management.
5 seconds.
Yeah. It's not really state management, right? It's normally just application architecture. I think there's a misappropriation of the word. So
next one.
Make it testable, make it maintainable, and don't use global variables everywhere. Thank you.
I would say there's going to be more libraries until a point where it's only going to be a few libraries.
Interesting forecast. We'll see how this turns out. No?
The question was opinions on state management or testing?
State management. A quick sidetrack.
Okay, cool. There's no best state management solution. So depending on your use case.
That's a good one, yeah. I always say, do what feels right. Look at what other people do
100%,
and choose something which feels right and works for your use case, because there's so many use cases and they're all different. So next up, we have a question, which was partially answered. It is, how is your testing workflow? So testing workflow in this case doesn't have to involve automated testing. Automated testing is just part of testing. Usually when you develop a feature, you take a look at the app yourself. You click through, you tap through, you see if it works. How do you usually verify, and how do you iterate on bugs, and how do you fix stuff, and how do you make sure that it works at the very end?
I can sort of hook into this, I think.
Sure.
Don't know how much time I have, but whatever. I think one thing that I've learned over the years to do, which is a really easy sort of trick for yourself is make use of Flutter's hot reload after you've started working on a project. With that, I mean, say that you have some screen and you're making a new button or a new widget or whatever. I see myself sometimes working on that component just on its own and just keep writing it. And then at the end, I'll make an example in my app so I can view it, maybe in a gallery or of some sorts. And then I'll see the result and everything crashes and I need to nail down the bug somewhere. If you do it the other way around and you first add this new widget into a gallery or somewhere where you can see it and run it, then you can iteratively work on it and fix issues along the way. So that's sort of one way that I like to work on new components. And then while doing so, you'll inevitably test all that stuff. Then usually another good step is take your flowcharts, if you have them, or mockups or UI or UX designs, or make them yourself because they're a very good idea to have in the first place. Then run through them and see if all your paths work out. Just manually testing, right? And if it looks good, because only humans can sort of judge what looks right. If animations are janky, I mean, there's metrics for everything, but if it looks good, it's probably fine. And turn off your backend server on production once in a while to see what happens if your app crashes. That's not actually a good idea, but you know, try different situations. Turn off 3G, turn off GPS, turn off internet. Absolutely wreck your phone to the point where it won't function anymore except for a touchscreen, and then see if your app still holds up. If it does, great, you know. And if not, you might need to go back and tweak some stuff.
Great
That's
advice. So one thing we've learned: wreck your
Yeah.
phone.
Don't quote me on that.
In the case of my the main company that I'm working on, all the business logic needs to have at least 80% code coverage for all the stuff if they have business logic, because it could be just maybe UI centric logic, like, I don't know, a pop-up, and that's it. If they don't have, you don't pass any variables or anything, it could be that one of those cases. But if it has business logic, it needs to cover that amount of data. So we do for every single thing, because if you don't, the CI doesn't pass for every PR that you build. So you're pretty much a strict force to do it. So no matter what you do, you just force. If don't, doesn't pass. The other ones will be that I will say that it comes a little bit with experience, like kind of Jay say, a lot of Android developers who spend 6 to 10 years in the past time, like Simon and I have almost like 10 to 11 years doing Android. And when you go to Flutter, because you already stopped with so many rocks on Android, because the first versions of Android was just testing while you coding, because even if it looks good in code and the experience is you open the app and it will crash, you will need to go through every single thing. And because you didn't have null safety, you need to make sure that nothing has a null point interception until a point that Stack Overflow literally doesn't allow to post null point interceptions. And it was because of Android, because everyone posted null point interceptions to Stack Overflow. That's a fun fact. So I guess when you start coding on Flutter, you already think about all these unhappy or bad endings that your app can have. So you already have in your mindset of coding, it's like, okay, this could happen, this could auto happen, the patterns could be wrong. If the user increased the size of the fonts, it could overlap. There's a lot of different factors that could happen, and those come from experience. So if you don't have that experience, at least you need to have this mindset of, okay, if I build a feature, I need to make my UI test and UI and unit test to make sure that everything works. But if it comes from a good experience doing different platforms, you kind of have it already built inside your brain. You know that everything could broke, like anything could broke. So you already have in mind that if internet doesn't have this connection, what happened? What if I request to a server? Why don't I have a 2 or 3 seconds to make sure that, okay, if the server is not responding, then give me something UI related to the user so they know what's going on. If it fails, if it needs to retry it, and all those different stages. So yeah, that I can give you my size. Like, experience gives you a lot of insight of the things that could go wrong, and really wrong in an app.
Very good point you had there.
I think that is a good point. That's not tested enough, and that is connectivity issues. Like I think experienced developers test for that and try and work ahead of time and actually build it ahead of time to sort of cope with these things. A new developer just expects there to be an internet connection all the time, which is definitely not the case. What's even worse is when you actually have mid-connection, that you have things like go wrong or something like that, then you have fun things happen. But again, testing, that's supposedly supposed to solve these things. So, more testing.
Yes.
Interesting points.
So now, how do you usually go about your testing workflow? Even if you're not writing automated tests yet, how do you usually handle this?
Well, fun fact, I don't handle it, but after attending this talk, definitely I will share my feedback. Why not in future episodes?
That sounds great. Yeah, always nice to see stuff learned and stuff tried out. I think we had a few questions over the last discussion. I think one was if you are doing golden tests. Just a quick round.
Oh, it's I think this is Rona. I think this is the Rona that we know.
Yeah.
What are golden tests in general?
Yes, so golden tests, just a quick heads up. Basically, Flutter allows to screenshot different parts of the app and make a pixel perfect comparison between the expected look and the look of the widget and the actual look. So basically, you run the golden runner, which takes all the screenshots, you check them into your version control, and after some commits, some features, some pushes, you want to make sure you didn't touch the UI, just rerun the golden test, it verifies, it all looks good. What is your opinion? Quick round of this.
It's a good idea. I mean, sure, it's a good idea, right? But obviously, that takes up space in your repo to store the images for verification against. Make sure you got Git LFS, for the large file storage. There's obviously good reasons to do it, but to be honest, I've not found many reasons that it's required. Does that make sense? So again, if you're looking at a big app and you have big designs, it's a good idea to do that so you don't break things, right? I mean, the one thing that we do have, sorry to quickly say, the one thing that we do have with Flutter is we can test the UI. Yep. We don't have to look at these like screenshots. We don't have to use that as our final thing. So it's not like on something on Android where testing UI is very difficult. Testing UI in Android is testing UI in Flutter is very, very simple in comparison. So we don't really have the same problems that we'd have if it was one of the other platforms.
Good point.
I would say that I mostly agree, and I was about to point out, that since it's so easy, I feel like and I haven't done golden test that much myself either, but I feel like that is so nitpicky to the point where if the thing that I wanted to test and make sure was not broken, if there's something that I want to make sure is not broken in a big sort of way, I would have done so explicitly in my UI testing, since it's really easy to do, relatively speaking. It's still a bit time consuming, but so is everything. So I feel like golden test is a little bit too nitpicky. I don't need it to be pixel perfect. I just need to know that my margins are right and that everything is spaced properly, but I'll do so on my UI tests. So I personally don't write them.
Yeah, and I would say also the ones who come from Android, we know that Pixel Perfect is just a good name that iOS gained for several years until they start making more and more screens, and now they have this universal UIs and all the stuff to change the name. Because in the past, even when you coded something on Android, the clients will want Pixel Perfect, and they would not have it because Android used DP. So you have these densities that maybe someone is like, yeah, you have 4K in your 5 inches this phone. I don't know why, but that's what Android does. So I would say that one of the other things is a lot of smoke testing as well. Like while you are coding something, make sure that it looks good and maybe have a designer feedback. And it says like, hey, I passed it from 100 times. This is the best thing to look. It matches 99% of your design. Does it look good? Yes. Can we have a compromise for this part of the designs? Because a lot of designers, and this is the thing, they have Mac, they have iPhones, the clients have iPhones, they want the design as the iOS. And we say, sure, that's how it looks on iOS, but that's not how it looks on Android. That's not the look and feel, that's not the user experience on Android. We need to have a compromise. If we're going to have those compromise, how are we going to do it? And if they agree with those, and you just present them through your knowledge what an Android user expects for that UI. And again, it's not going to match 100%. So if you're nitpicking on that one, I would say don't, because that's not a real case scenario. Just be consistent on the difference of platforms and the changes you could have in your UI. And if it really kind of matches the look and feel the company is expecting to throw out and the user experience, then you're good.
I think there's also two things there. Like one, I think bigger companies as well now know there's lots of different variations of screen sizes and things like that, and they do understand there's no such thing as pixel perfect. It's going to scale. It's going to be different, especially with the new sort of ranges of iPhones and iPads now. You know, the screen size and variety of resolutions and densities has changed. But I think there's that, as Marianne was just saying, there's a really great time that if you have a designer on the team you're working on or in your company, you sit down near their sort of end of production, as it were, and go through and just do that sort of there's a name in building for this, but basically sort of doing that sort of final finessing, right, where you can touch up all the paint work and do all this kind of stuff. As a sort of sit down with the designer, go through, is this animation fluid? Would you want slightly different? I can do this, you can do that, you know, and just finally sort of smooth everything over, you know.
Are you looking for polish?
Yeah.
Final polish in the end, yeah.
Yes. So I think we're slowly reaching the end of the discussion. Before we finish this off, are there any community questions we want to quickly touch on, or do we go through, or do we still have time? What is?
I can only see questions about state management. I think
I think this is, you know, the way they say like every internet forum topic degrades, right?
Yeah.
I think every Flutter talk degrades to the point of state management.
Yeah, it's like every single app
Yeah.
converts into a chat app. Well, the same thing for Flutter. Every single conversation ended up in state management, which again, it's weird. It's the same thing that in the past when people start coding, it's like, oh, it's so difficult to pick a variable name. And for me, it's like, that's your issue? That's the simplest thing in the world. Like it's made
hard.
No, but it's like once you get a consistency in your code, writing new variable names is super easy. The same thing with state. Once you get into the run and you pick something that is going to be there, don't continue this topic of what is a good state management for your app. The ones who fits you and your team. If it fits you and your team, then go with that one. Even if it's a little bit more complicated than it should, but if it fits your team and everyone feels comfortable, then go for it. Just don't overstate this state management craziness that it's not actually. And at the end of the day, it's like, I know that some apps could live with the save state, which is the worst one, but some apps could live without one. Some apps could live with the value notifier, and that's it. But if you have something massive, something tremendous in app and skill, then yeah, you will need something more elaborated at provider or block or different others that allows you to scale, having this kind of dependency injection kind of thing, if you want to call it.
But back to the testing, we are definitely on the side. But to the testing, we got a question from Luca, and he asks, in the context of end-to-end tests, how do you usually test async streams? So pretty technical. Do you like what is offered by the test package, like emits or matches? Does anybody of you have a take on this?
Yes, I like it.
I do want to say, just to make sure that everyone understands, E2E is end-to-end, and that also means the new integration test that was renamed, right? So just make sure everyone's aware that it's integration testing. Yeah.
So,
Go on, Jay.
does anybody have a strong grasp on this? Because this seems very specific and technical, which might be quite hard to answer in the live Q&A.
I can speak to this slightly. I do more block tests that are provided by the block package than streams specifically, async or not. But what I've been needing to test as far as streams go has been handled perfectly by the emits and the matchers and all the mechanics that you have to test a stream. So I don't have really any gripes with it as far as that goes. And also, like, having to test your streams is a good idea, or testing your streams in general is a good idea. Like most things are a good idea to test. But if it's complex to the point where you need to write a lot of tests, you might need to think about how you're using streams in the first place, because there really should be, in my opinion, just a simple flow of data that shouldn't be that complex, or you need to split it up, or you need to sort of simplify down in general. not saying that testing is a bad idea, but please do. But also think about the architecture as a whole.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
One last question for you, Naval. What will be the first test you will try out when getting into this topic? After all these opinions from pretty specific topics to golden tests, what will be your first test you want to try out?
I think the golden test. I don't know. I have no idea why.
It sounds fancy.
they're super interesting.
Tempting to test.
So the fun thing about golden tests is also they replace the fonts with
I was about to say this.
with this weird font, which isn't actually a font. And the fun trivia about this is because font rendering is slightly different on different machines. So depending on what machine you run the application, you might get a failure of the test, even though the correct font and size and everything is provided. But just because a different platform, the font rendering might be different. So don't get scared if you see all your text disappearing and being blocks of black.
So you get weird text. There is an override for this. There is actually a command line override to use the real fonts. I forget what it is off the top of my head, but you can go look that one up. However, as Norbert said, it's great if you've got like a CI server running your tests, then obviously that's always going to be repetitively the same output. So you can test with the real fonts. But on if you've got multiple developers all running the same tests on different machines, you might end up with complications.
Sounds like you need to write your tests for tests.
Sometimes it happens. Yes.
That's the question for our viewers. If somebody can answer
tests.
Who tests the tests? So to close off this discussion, everybody of you has 10 seconds to plug their Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, or whatever you have. So who wants to start?
Well, we have our Twitter handles on the screen, so yeah, follow me on Twitter. There you go.
So Twitter for Simon. Jay, do you want to say something as an end?
Follow our Twitters and keep in check with the lists. Follow fluttercommunity.dev /GitHub for all the good packages. I make music. I do a whole bunch of stuff. You can find me on Twitter. Good luck.
You can find me on Twitter, GigMC. If not, it's MKIISoft. And if not, put my name on Google and literally shows up my, I don't know, Medium, Stack Overflow, you name it. I need to stop being in everywhere, but yeah, you can find me everywhere.
So I'd say obviously like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz, right? Like we want.
Let's smash the like button. Yeah.
We want people to subscribe, and then we'll get notifications on new stuff that comes out.
Yes. Yeah. Make sure to click the bell and to all notifications.
There's one.
Naval, what about you?
Actually, I think I might steal your line since I do the outros for the events that I do at JDJ. Stay tuned for more awesome events.
Perfect.
Already hired for the Flutter Coffee Show.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being part of this. It was a great chat. I think we had a few interesting points, some great insight. I hope our viewers learned something new. I hope you learned something new. So thank you and see you next time.
Thank you for taking the time.
Bye.
Take care.
Take care.
So that was a pretty good chat.
Testing is something you could literally do a whole Flutter Coffee Show or a discussion about 2 hours because it's quite difficult. Also, state management, we got your ideas. We will listen to it. We will see what we can do in the next show.
And even testing with different state management solutions.
Oh, wow.
You can explore this area as long as you want to.
Yeah, this rabbit hole is going deeper and deeper. But, well, we are at the end of the first Flutter Coffee Show. Thank you all for being part of this. We love the community contributions. We want to thank all the speakers who participated, who sent us contributions, also all joining the Q&A. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah.
Thank you all in the studio for taking the time, cutting the videos, making the audio, making the video. Thank you, Norbert, for taking part.
Thank you, Mike.
And we are planning the next session on the 22nd of October. So in about 5 weeks, another Thursday, another round of fresh Flutter news, showcases, technical deep dives, and a few more surprises So I hope you all enjoyed today's show. Please follow us on social media, send us your ideas, send us feedback and your contributions, what you want to see in the Flutter Coffee Show. Last thing we have to say, wherever you are, stay safe, stay healthy, and see you next time in the Flutter Coffee Show. Take care.
Take care. Bye.